Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
This series is brought to you by Hub24, Australia's leading provider of integrated platform, technology and data solutions to the wealth industry. By working with licensees and advisors, Hub24 is delivering innovative solutions and service excellence that enables you to do business your way, creating efficiencies for your business and value for your clients. These are just some of the reasons why advisors have rated Hub24 number one for overall satisfaction and best managed portfolio functionality 6 years running, empowering better financial futures together. Find out more at hub24.com.au.
Hello and welcome to this topic series on delivering cost-effective advice with an entrepreneurial mindset. My name is Fraser Jack, and in this, the final episode rounding out the series, we explore how Greg Newman, head of distribution at Hub24, is working with so many business principals to help them lean into their entrepreneurial mindset. Now, I love it when we get to, pull out the research and explore the findings, and that's exactly what we got to do in this episode. So if the future of your business depends on you, then this episode is a must. Greg Newman, thank you so much for joining me again in the final episode of our 5-part series. I really appreciate you coming along and being involved. Now, in the first episode, we sort of mentioned that we're going to get you back in and talk to you about some of the opportunities and challenges that present themselves when it comes to, thinking with an entrepreneurial mindset in this world that we all live in, this ever-changing new world of advice, we like to call it. Let's go. Let's kick off. Tell us about what are some of the opportunities you're seeing available.
Thanks, Fraser. I think one of the most obvious opportunities for advisors at the moment is that it's a classic case of demand increasing, as in for advice, yet on the supply side there is a decrease.
The classic supply and demand.
Which is, if you're on the right side of that, that's a great problem to have. And so I think the opportunity that we're seeing for advisors is to play into that and be quite discerning about what part of an ever-growing opportunity do you want to play in. So being really, really clear about how you could tackle that. And there's lots and lots of different ways to do that. So we know that our advisor numbers are diminishing. I think in my previous conversation we talked about them dipping again almost to 15,000 in this financial year. But the retirement savings pool and the number of people involved is just growing at an exponential rate.
So the needs growing, the advisor numbers are shrinking. You mentioned the word advisors getting clarity on what they're doing and to be able to then express what they're doing, exactly how they help clients. What are you seeing with advisors doing a great job and actually just narrowing that down and going, this is what we're going to focus on?
Yeah, and often the answer is under their nose. And the exercise of resegmenting their existing business around who are the clients that, one, they're enjoying dealing with, and it's an interesting way to start the segmentation process. So there's very much a part that advisors are saying, if I'm going to be in this for the next 10 to 15 years and I've got an opportunity to deal with a particular type of client, who is it that I enjoy dealing with and why? And it doesn't necessarily mean an economic value. It's a type of client that they're wanting to take on. So we've said that what services do you want to provide is key. So that opportunity there is one that thinking about, are there quite unique services that might need to be provided to a group of people? And we talked earlier about, say, some of the millennials, where they may opt in for an advice event, which might be, kind of an earlier phase in their life. It could even be an inheritance or money coming through. And having a specific set of services that meets their needs with the view that at some stage those clients will then adopt a total advice model. And what it really starts to look like, Fraser, is that the traditional advice business, which might consist of a couple of hundred clients that would be considered fee-paying ongoing advice clients actually expands to maybe 400 or 500 clients, where there's a rotating core of clients that are taking on ongoing advice arrangements, and some are cycling in and some are cycling out. And that is very different to how the world we know is operated, because you need quite a dynamic model that's related to pricing and services, and of course the compliance of the advice around that.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? I love the concept that you just went in when you thought about who you're going to deal with, what's going to, what they need, how and when you're going to provide that services, and get right into those. You mentioned some of the concepts around understanding that fees coming in and out, but that also relies heavily on a lot of the, and so does the how are you going to provide these services. It relies a lot on sort of technology and data, in this new world of being able to say, well, let's actually use data to dictate some of the decisions we make around what business we're going to have.
Yes, and this is one of the most exciting parts of where we can go with advice. And I think most people have heard about their robo-advice and different journeys, which have tended to be related probably to more of the industry super funds and doing inter-fund advice solutions. At Hub, we've been partnering with a number of groups, including Aberdeen Standard, around the role of bionic advice. And we're still very much in the early part of that. We're in a beta test with a number of groups, but it's super exciting. And conceptually what it is about is saying that there's a whole group of people who probably don't want to pay for, or the advisors don't want to charge them for a full advice package, but you need to get them on a journey with their own money really early on. And telling someone to have a relationship with their money is not going to be enough, and it's very much data that plays a role, which we're seeing through the work we're doing, is that if you can play back to a client, and it's usually an existing client, their life circumstance, which might be their bank accounts, their platform accounts, their investment or their share broking accounts, if you can play that back to them and say, is this you? And get them on a journey of education about here's where you are and doing a comparison to peers, or even just as simple as, are you on track or off track for your retirement savings goal? It's a very different way that clients start to engage with their money. And that robo journey is very much one where people can self-educate and self-choose, look at different options, and this is very much played back to them. But there'll be points where we see with this bionic advice approach where people would say, I don't want to self-help anymore. I actually want to opt out, and I want to opt into an advice arrangement.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, this one, because this is, obviously, if we're thinking of it from an entrepreneurial mindset, I always think of different industries and professions and how they're doing it. The DIY market is obviously huge when it comes to home owning and building and those sorts of things. So people are now going and renovating their own bedroom instead of getting a painter and decorator in to do it, for example. You've only got to think about Bunnings as a business model to understand that there's a DIY market available. But advice, we haven't really been able to work through what that DIY model could or possibly look like. And you mentioned data being such a massive part of the truth, and the source of data being accurate and being able to provide people with truthful data and information, and to be able to say this is what they're doing, this is where they could be going, this is what they could be missing out on. But sometimes it's about, and what the advisors have done so well over many years, is bring that emotional concept to that decision-making process to say, this means that for you. And this means that you will go from, uncertain about how you're going to retire to confident about how you're going to, or whatever it might be, from one to the other. And advisors have done that really well. And that's probably something that Robo in the past hasn't really grasped. It's sort of been able to demonstrate the numbers, but not the emotional aspect.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that that probably sits slightly before that is that the challenge in being able to play data back to people is that so much of the data that's held is unstructured. And when you've just got, remember, we're talking about it, these bionic advice engines not being something that where you put an ad and say, come and see me and you'll get advice from a complete stranger. This is usually clients of an existing advisor, or they could be the siblings of existing clients, or they could be the children of clients. So there's a fair amount of relationship there. It's just economically not quite lined up yet. And often that involves lots of unstructured data as far as file notes or profiles about who they are or the like. So part of that is saying, here's what I know about you, get the data right, fill in the gaps for me. And when you fill the gaps in, it gives me a fresh view of you. And a really powerful thing is to compare. Are there others in your age group or your like doing better than you are? Now, you don't obviously call it out in that way, but it shows where people are tracking on that retirement goal. And that's a huge motivator for people to act.
Oh, absolutely. We're sort of ingrained in us. That benchmarking thing is kind of ingrained in us. Anybody who's ever played a sport in their lifetime or just competed at a hand of cards or whatever it might be, there is this competition that creates people then to go, oh, that if they can do it, I can do it, or if they've already done it, I want to be able to do it. So it's definitely a great little let's say gamification of that process to be able to introduce that. Now, I also wanted to touch on the fact that this is what we're talking about is stepping stones. Stepping stones not just to advice, but to engagement, having the emotional, the attachment, the engagement, the DIY process, if you like, that allows them to say, well, I'm interested in this now, but I might have taken my DIY journey to as far as I can, and I now need to go see a financial advisor. So it's kind of like stepping stones to advice, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And again, so many of these clients, and the thing that there's some really interesting research coming through, which is the clients that we're talking about could be within 1 or 2 years of full advice journeys, but they are operating differently. And some research that we looked at recently suggested that the majority of an advisor's profit is being generated by what we know as the current retirement market, which is, the really valuable clients that have got their retirement savings set. And we're not saying throw the baby boomers out with the bathwater. We're saying there's a spot, but these are your acorns coming through, but those acorns are growing faster than you might think. And what is really coming out in that research with the wealth transfer from our current retirement market in the next 10 to 20 years, the actual split of an advisor's profit will probably invert. And that is the most profitable clients, or where they're making their profit from today's retirees, will actually be substituted by the next generation coming through. And so building the generation now, and if you're an advisor that's, the average advisor age might be 49 years. I'm not sure the XY users might be representative of that. We know they're going to be around for 10 or 15 years in business. So they'll be dealing with a totally different set of clients. So getting the right clients and the mix, and this whole theme of changing your mix and being discerning about your target market, it's not about choosing the right client only in today's retiree market. That's definitely a part of it, but it's actually choosing the right clients to nurture through that process, which, does get back to data, does get back to digital and how they'll engage with you.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of things to unpack in there: longevity of the business and diversification of the business as well. Not just looking at. I mean, obviously businesses do well when they niche right down into one specific type of client. But then, of course, if those people are in retirement or whatever it might be, then the longevity of the business needs to be considered. So, bringing in that, as you mentioned, that having a range of pre-retirees as well as retirees, or accumulators as well as retirees. Now, that's sort of the I guess probably the big opportunity we sort of covered there, with regard to supply and demand. What are some of the other opportunities you see within the current landscape?
Oh, look, certainly, I think that the supply and demand part is a part of it, but working on the business is equally important. And that's the efficiency part of a practice. And this sense of digitizing practices is being talked about quite readily, but it is at the heart of everything that we're talking to advisors about, and AFSLs in particular. And this digitization, we spend a lot of time talking about there's so much data coming through. Like the amount of data is just astronomical. And we start to, when you think about, a bit of a fun fact here is that there's as humans, we're producing 300 billion emails every day. It's just mind blowing, and there's 500 million tweets out there, and 90% of the data that exists today was actually created in the last 2 years. So you start with this big picture of, wow, we're in this data age, and you go, okay, well, that's fine. It's almost like drinking from a fire hydrant. But then the concept of a mindset for advisors and practices is how do I digitize my practice? And digitizing does get into the structured and unstructured. And there's so many services that we're seeing now, Fraser, whereby AFSLs are, one of their value propositions is, how can we help you with your tech stack? And I never thought I'd be hearing people mentioning tech stacks as a value proposition. How can I help you with your X-Plan version? And all of this gets to the crux of help me digitize my practice so I can do all these other great things.
Yeah, exactly right. Digitization has certainly been one of those things that has been, when it's kind of like the outcome is great. We can get all the stuff, but the process along the way has often caused a little bit of pain and thinking, do I need to push my own pathway through this jungle, or is there a prearranged, a map and a way through? So absolutely. And efficiency is something that I think advisors have been crying out for over the last few years, with more and more requirements being stacked upon each other.
And I think, this is the scary part. The digitization is just, it's a building block of what you could do. And it could be a building block for having a totally different opportunity to realise with millennials or those who are more digitised. I think that's a really fun and positive way to think about it. But having a digitised practice can also be one whereby if your licensee or a regulator says, I'd like to have a look at these 50 client files or these 20 client files. I've seen that stall businesses. We saw it stall some of the major banks, which is, that notice, I'd like to understand more about it. And what we see is that this conversation where advisors are experiencing huge amounts of stress and anxiety and lost time is actually from doing a lot of compliance tasks. You hear about, it's too much compliance. Well, there is, but a lot of it is involved with tasks that are non-value adding. It's trying to find this piece of information for that client, which is a file note, which is an email, which is an SOA, which is an ROA, which is, in all different spots. So the digitisation process about bringing that together and structuring that data so that if there is an inquiry, or if you do want to actually be proactive in your compliance, you've got that foundation. And we see that, the value of, there's a distinction between data and structured data, and we use the data as the new oil analogy, which I'm sure many people have heard. It is great.
I love that analogy, and you're absolutely right about compliance. Compliance has never been the problem. It's the inefficiencies around compliance and the ineffectiveness around compliance that people have frustrations with. Absolutely right. And structured data, as you said, is like oil. There's plenty of it there now, and we just need to work out how to refine it.
That's right, and that's the thing. Otherwise, it's kind of just gooey and horrible and smelly, as opposed to you can make lots of interesting things that drive outcomes. So we see that approach of the digitising of the practice is the major opportunity that people could springboard off going forward. And so if I kind of recap on the areas that everyone is that we're talking to groups about, and this is not us telling them, this is what they're telling us. There's a lot of innovative practices out there. Is that this sense which I talked about, drive profit from the right clients and grow that segment is key. Digitising the practice is the pedestal for that, and with that comes increased profitability, and hopefully with a better deal for the clients as well, where you're getting less cost and more efficiency coming into the practice, and we see that as the world we're in at the moment is probably the frequency of change will continue as it is. I don't think there's anything unique about the world we're dealing with, but those enablers of digitising and preparing is something that we truly believe on. And it's so strange because it's not a traditional characteristic or attribute that we've asked planners or AFSLs to take on. We've asked them to be technically brilliant, to be great communicators, to be very empathetic, to be profitable, usually small to medium enterprises. But we haven't actually asked them to also be kind of tech geniuses on the side. So there's another one to jump through.
Yeah, it's the tech genius part is one that I think people struggle with because it's a whole new world, and if you can, I guess you get it wrong, you get it wrong. It's often a way that people find as one of the challenges. We're talking about opportunities, and it's probably one of the challenges too.
It is, and we've done some work with advisors looking at really the impacts of all of this change and their ability to adapt with it. And we've done a series of webinars with a researcher by the name of Dr. Adam Fraser. And one of the things he looked at is why advisors are some of the most stressed people as a profession, which is terrible. And he did a really substantial survey of some 800 advisors. But within that cohort, they found about 45 advisors who were known as thrivers. And this cohort of people, there was a really common attribute was that they took this approach, which was a realization that what I'd done in the past to make me successful probably won't necessarily make me successful in the future. And we've heard that in different forums before. But they're very much the theme that came through was that they were really happy, and the term I use is they were happy to throw things over their shoulder to someone else to deal with that had a better capability. And that might have been the digitising of the practice or the outsourcing of the compliance or their tech stack. But what came through was it allowed them to very much be focused on what they loved doing and got all the energy from, which was advice giving. When you think about it, advisors, as their businesses are actually getting bigger, and that's one of the things that's happening is that the complexity is increasing with the change. They're having to give up some of the tasks that they used to do, and this theme of just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it. And that's what we're seeing people making decisions constantly about. I traditionally gave strategic financial advice and I gave investment construction advice. That's the classic that everyone talks about. Just because I can doesn't mean I should, because in doing potentially the investment approach where it might be an individual portfolio for every client, we know there's an ROA, SOA involvement. So the shift is, well, okay, what's my next step to that? Is it actually an approach of using a model? Or is it a core and satellite approach, or do I outsource to a managed account provider or to an investment professional or asset consultant? So what we're seeing is that migration away from what I used to do to something that's very different. And the really pleasing thing is that a lot of the investment advice side, which is pretty fun and exciting and what probably motivated a lot of advisors originally to take on the profession, is something that the clients are willing to see outsourced, but they value the strategic advice more. And so it's this kind of reshaping of the value proposition, which used to get two things from me, where you get this and you get more of that. So we see that change is readily accepted by the end user being the client, but it's probably more challenging to let advisors accept that in their own mind.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's obviously been a mindset that a lot of advisors have been through recently, trying to work out where they do and don't start and stop with their value propositions and getting their heads around that. But also, sometimes by trying to do everything means that you can't do everything, and that's actually a compliance risk in itself.
Oh, absolutely. And the overlay of the compliance risk, when we really think about it, is that it's been very reactive. So compliance has been, tell me what you did. And what we're seeing as an opportunity through digitisation, and this is being adopted by many AFSLs and providers, is how do you do proactive or preventative client compliance, which is, here's what the risk profile said, here's what I'm doing, this is what would normally occur for this client. Does this look right before it's even implemented? And that's very different from big stick chasing to actually something quite comforting.
I was going to say a lot of that comes into, being able to have the system that can check the data on the way through, rather than the inefficiency of having a compliance person look over one person's shoulder, but be able to use a system or use some digitization to be able to assess those things and give a few ticks on the way through.
Absolutely. There's so many people on this journey. There's great providers out there, but it's not easy. You would have seen recently, I think, even with the ASX and their blockchain enhancements that we've seen coming through, is that these are not easy things to upgrade and change. Systems that the industry uses, but we're really pleased with the progress that we make at Hub24 on one, obviously being a platform and managed account provider, but we see our role as being broader with other industry participants to help build the foundation that we've talked about, because if we don't get the foundation right, advisors will never help them really deliver the efficiency that they demand to be in this business.
Yeah, one of the thoughts around open banking was it was going to allow for this unsiloed approach of large corporates keeping the information to themselves and not being prepared to not so much share the data, but to structure the data in a way that clients can actually call upon it.
Yes, we've seen that. I remember talking with a client about 3 years ago about how open access to open banking data was imminent, and I think we're still seeing different banks roll that out. There was different order of events and their capability to do it. A lot more of that information is now available. We know that, as an example, with our business, we've got over 200 different data connections, which covers everything from your X-Plan data to our own platform to share registries and the like, to margin lenders and the case. So there is real progression forward on that. Banks are a core part of it. Unless you can get that transaction data coming through, at least a line item summarising that, it's a fundamental part. But it's good. It's empowering people with their own financial future, and it kind of takes us all the way back to the start, which is if there's a different generation who want to go on a journey, they need access to their own data and that consolidated view, and us enabling that is something that we see is a real journey. It's something we started the journey nearly 5 years ago, and we still think that we were early in that, but there's heaps of work to do yet.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? From a consumer point of view, if I put my consumer hat on, I'm thinking to myself, surely an industry like the financial services or the profession of financial services should be able to get this sorted with all of the resources it has available to it. That because any inefficiency currently in the process or the system is borne by me, the consumer.
Oh, it is, and I think this is the thing that comes through is that probably some of the experiences that the financial services industry in whole, and if we think about that is somewhat different to what most consumers expect. Like if I consume a lot through my iPhone, and I've got whether it be my music library or a Spotify account, or it could be anything else that consolidates any part of my life, the experience I get often through financial services is a single view and click once, and I've got that link to this account. And I can play it through my speakers in my lounge room. You think about the analogy of what we do seamlessly in the rest of our life. Our industry is not immune to that. We don't get a get out of jail card because it's called financial services. So us breaking the friction points is essential. And again, that next generation coming through, the digital natives who are getting $3.5 trillion of wealth transferred to them, that's their minimum standard, which is You've got to be able to deal with me on the terms I'm dealing with everybody else in my life. It's how I shop. It's how I consume. It's how I interact with people. So we're on a journey, but I think, it's the right journey.
Yes, and we really need to try and close that gap between where consumers are expecting financial services to be to where we've currently got to. So those are probably some of the big opportunities that we've been through. Are there any more opportunities that you see for advisors?
I think the opportunities that we're seeing for advisors very much at the moment is that the education process that they've gone through FASEA and that took a huge amount of time and stress from them. And I think the opportunity that we're seeing now is in the absence of that, which was some really heavy, hard yards of study for many people, is how do you want to use that time that's now available to you? And that might be something as simple as that's how they need to recharge, because I think one of the things we've seen is it's okay not to use that time to go and get busy again. It's actually to recharge your batteries and do something in your business or with your family or your life. But the nature of advisors is they're just going to go and solve another problem. The nature of entrepreneurs is that, okay, well, how do I apply that? And I certainly, we're seeing this, that the opportunity for advisors, again, it goes back to be collaborating more with their peers. I think the last 2 years has shown us something, which is the community. And you guys are just the best part of a community exemplified, which is, do I spend that time more as a part of my advisor community? And I think what comes off the back of that is there's new insights, there's new thoughts about what I outsource, what do I get involved in, and there's new energy. So we're seeing that opportunity of some really tough, mundane new AFSL, new education, all those sort of things, to supplant that with some really positive, uplifting things. And we're seeing, again, those advisors that are thriving have got a very balanced approach. They haven't automatically gone into it. They've been participants of the communities like XY and the like, and some of the things that ourselves and other groups have done. So we'd see that very much as be kind to yourself at the moment is a real opportunity for many advisors.
Yep, and without digging too deeply into the mental health of financial advisors, because we are trying to keep it upbeat and obviously flexible, and that mentally flexible. Talk to us about some of the challenges that have been the headwinds that advisors have faced, and where they, and how we then turn those things into opportunities.
I think the biggest headwinds that they've really faced is just the rate of change that's come at them. And I think that the example I'll give you, like, this is just to rattle off a few. And that was, so we had LIF reforms, we had COVID-19 relief for our clients, we had FASEA, we had SDB legislation, retirement incomes report, OFA change arrangements, breach reporting changes, DDO, all these sorts of things. You just name it. That's only a list of about 15 running across about 4 regulatory bodies. I think the opportunity at the moment is to say we got our house in order. I think that's very much the case, but it's not stopping. So that challenge it's going to be there. The next immediate challenge is getting ongoing advice obligations completed, so there's not a revenue impact. So we see that as probably one of the more immediate challenges coming through. The other part that we're seeing is that it'd be fair to say in the last couple of years, market's been quite friendly to a lot of clients from their investment portfolios. It's kind of set an interesting expectation. We know things have eased very much of late. But I think one of the big challenges will be getting people back to, here's what you might want to expect, and some of the changes that we see managers talking about, taking some risk off the table, restructuring slightly more defensive positions. They're very much back to the core of what advice givers are doing. So I think it's in some ways it's a challenge, but it's the part of the conversation and the work that advisors do, which is most value to clients, which is it doesn't just keep running this way. We're not picking share market falls or anything like that, but we're certainly seeing some de-risking and restructuring that's happening.
Yeah, certainly it sounds like a lot of communication, a lot of keeping in front of things as they're happening, and ongoing communication with clients, letting them know, helping them set expectations.
Yes, certainly. And with the amount of change that is also going on, people, I don't think there's still a lot to unroll. It doesn't take long to walk down the street and see there's some changes in where people shop and some small businesses, and I don't think it's fully transpired what the financial impact the last couple of years has had. Now, some of that will be really positive. I'm sure it will be, and people have had the opportunities to do different things they've never done before. But the challenge will be keeping abreast of how did it affect everybody. If I'm running, a business that's got a couple of hundred clients, staying abreast of just how much change impacted those 200 clients, which was COVID related, as well as some of them having retired and some of those having inherited and some of those having changed jobs. There's just another layer of the requirement to know, where is my client at now? The great news on the back of that, as we probably appreciate, is that pretty well every part of it is a likely opportunity for an advice event to help the client take that next step.
Yep.
So again, it's the opportunities to fill the void with things that are great, but it does get back to getting the foundations of the business right.
Yep. Now, with your entrepreneurial hat on, let's talk about what the future might look like for an advice practice.
Wow. I'd love to say it's a practice that the advisor is kind of 4 days a week and getting somewhere around 8 weeks a year off and the like. I don't think it's that way. I just think that the nature of advisors is very different to that, and they'll continue to be busy. We really do see that it will be a mix of the digital and the human, though, Fraser. I think that at the moment, most practices with that client interaction is all human. For us to really look into the future of how more Australians get financial advice, a practice will have to have a digital solution for some part of the client journey. And
Yep.
it'll probably be small steps through it, whether it be fact-finding or guided journeys, to ultimately that description I said before, a couple hundred core clients rotating through 600. We're solidly of the belief that is very much where it'll be.
So clients rotating in and out of your core offering, but still being in that peripheral of offering them, whether it's education or literacy or
That's
information or whatever it might be. So and when you say digital, you're not just talking about robo advice, you're talking about things, automations and being able to record something and send it out to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that, the entrepreneurs that we've seen, they use, apps like Slack and the like. They create channels that people can run on. Those that are probably on the more entrepreneurial side are very much moving to the recognition, I've got to be digitized. I'm going to have a different set of clients. They're probably going to be a bit more high net worth, the ones that I'm dealing with at the moment, because that's the nature of it. I've got a mind for the future of how I'm dealing with them, as in the periphery clients. And remembering, there was kind of this argument before, this term of, do I sack clients? Which is, most advisors, were pretty horrified by that concept. You don't sack clients, they're just struggling to work out what to do with them. So I think the practice of the future is very much about, we're getting close to finding a solution to clients I couldn't realistically provide the service I want for. So that's very much a part of it. I don't think the world of SAC clients is really upon us. It's differential services from price and relationship. But the advisor at the centre again, and we talked about this, if I could describe it this way, is as the practices got bigger, them playing the instruments historically versus to conducting the orchestra is probably what it looks like. And that being very different, which is that orchestra or the components of the orchestra could be other specialists outside of this, whether it be their accountants, their lawyers, and the like, quite traditional in that. But it could be their tech consultants, their compliance consultants, and the like. And the entrepreneurs are very much seeing themselves as that's a part of my job, and to a degree, them trying to protect their advice-giving hours. So instead of trying to do those jobs, outsource those, conduct that part of your business, but here's the core part of what I want to do. And, they're adopting that. And I kind of go back to the nature of what the entrepreneurs do, is that they're changing how people do things. That's the nature of it. They're doing that. And when it gets to it, then the nature of the entrepreneurs that we're seeing is that their mindset hasn't changed. They're constantly seeing possibilities and solutions where the average person sees it as an annoyance. So that mindset's not changing. And I try and apply this, that if I'm seeing something as an annoyance, if someone's seeing it as a positive, it must be able to be seen as a positive. And that's what I think that they're doing, which is they're working really hard to keep their mindset right for that success. So it just doesn't happen. It's not just, it's actually a lot of process associated with what entrepreneurs do.
Yep.
So we see very much that them maintaining this business, but they're thriving. They're absolutely of a view that this is a great industry to be in. There's a seismic change in wealth transfer that they'll be a part of and giving advice on. And all the technologies are at their fingertips. They're not all smooth, but if they're willing and have a capacity to embrace it, they'll see themselves as having very successful businesses. Yeah. And ultimately, what's it about? It's the biggest, it's their life's work, it's their asset. They'll see an appreciation of the value of that, which is, ultimately from the end of the day, they've got, lives to lead and assets to build. We see that, the value of advice businesses, should increase, because supply and demand will go back to the fundamentals. You're supplying something that's in high demand and you can make profit from it.
Exactly right. And then if you overlay that equation and we want to grow our businesses, then scale is definitely seems to be the way we need to, it's the piece of the jigsaw puzzle that we need to unlock.
It is.
Greg, thanks so much for coming and chatting to us today. Really appreciate it. If somebody wants to reach out to you, find out more about what you're doing there at Hub, or reach out to you individually, what's the best way for them to continue the conversation?
Best way to do that, we've got a national team of business development managers and state managers and training relationship managers. Everyone's a manager that I seem to be mentioning, all listed on our Hub website. We love spending time with advisors. It's actually been quite easy virtually these days. We get to see and hear from a lot more people. But we'd love to hear from you. Hub has very much appreciated the success that advisors have delivered to us, and we'd appreciate any input on today's session or anything that we can do to help you with your broader business needs and client needs.
Greg, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Fraser.